Hello friends and neighbors, Matt Hatter here, and I have a confession to make. I actually really like Star Trek Generations. Okay, for those of you who don't have the foggiest idea what I'm talking about, let me explain. The Star Trek franchise has been around for decades, and whether you're a Trekker or a Trekkie or not a fan of the show at all, you've at least heard of Star Trek. And like most major franchise, it had movies, 11 of them to be exact. And you might already be aware of the pattern that these movies followed. Very basically, the odd-numbered movies are bad, and the even-numbered movies are good. Until you get to Star Trek Nemesis and the new Star Trek movie, but yeah, we'll let that go. But going by this formula, we find that Star Trek Generations, which is the 7th Star Trek movie, would fall into the bad category. So why would I like this movie? Because not only do I like Star Trek Generations, it's one of my favorite movies. So let's take a look at it and find out why it's one of my favorrit movies.
Do you follow me?
Not really.
Fight in here. This is a
Shoot your eye out, kid.
Why is the run go serious?
They say time is the fire in which we burn. Right now, Captain, my time is running out. We leave so many things unfinished in our lives. I know you understand.
So basically what I'm going to do for this review is outline the major complaints that people seem to have against Star Trek Generations and then explain why either I disagree with them or I don't think they're that big a deal. First major complaint, it's too complicated and too riddled with plot holes, and yeah, I'd be lying if I said I didn't agree. For Star Trek Generations, the makers basically had a laundry list because this was the first Star Trek movie that featured the Next Generation cast and not the original Star Trek cast. But because it was a transitionary movie, they also wanted to find a way to put William Shatner as Kirk and Patrick Stewart as Picard on screen together. And what did they come up with? Probably the biggest deus ex machina in cinema history. And so we have the Nexus, a very ambiguously defined piece of space phenomena that basically transports anyone who goes near it into the perfect world for that person. And here's the major problem with this. Star Trek as a franchise is about technology. It's about how science and technology have advanced not to the point where they're evil, but to the point where they're actually making the world a better place. But it's very technology-centric, and to introduce what is basically a supernatural element to this movie is jarring to say the least. But this is how they get the two captains together, because essentially Kirk, everyone thought he had died, but in fact he went into the Nexus and has been there for the past almost 80 years. And then Picard goes into the Nexus and gets Kirk out and they save the world. Yeah, can you see why people think that this movie is confusing? So yeah, the Nexus is really ambiguously defined. It is basically a catch-all saving thing, and it's a supernatural element where a supernatural element really doesn't belong. But this really doesn't bother me too much for a couple of reasons. First of all, just my personal preference. Plot holes don't usually bother me, just because I usually just come up with explanations for myself. And second of all, there are some episodes of Star Trek pretty much across the board, across all of the series, that have bigger plot holes than this. So I'm willing to forgive the plot holes, and also the Nexus wasn't just a plot device to get the two captains together, it also helped them realize what it was that they truly wanted. Captain Picard, who never had a family, never married and settled down and had children, finds himself in a world where this has occurred. And Kirk, who left the love of his life, one of them, to go back to Starfleet, finds himself able to basically have a do-over with this person. But they both realize that even though these worlds seem perfect, they still feel that call to serve Starfleet. That was why they abandoned these things in the first place. And honestly, I really like that bit of character development. So the Nexus and the complexity and the confusingness of the plot, I'm willing to forgive. Point 2, Data is freaking annoying. All I can really say to this is I don't think that he is. That's personal preference. I don't think he's annoying. A lot of people do, so let's move on. And finally, probably one of the biggest things that people complain about in Star Trek Generations, oh my god, they killed Kirk. Well, yeah. I mean, this is, like I said, a transitionary movie. We are transitioning between the original cast and the Next Generation cast. That's why the movie is called Generations. That is why we see the Enterprise D destroyed. That is why throughout the movie we have two different uniforms as they transition between the old style of uniforms and the new style of uniforms. That was intentional. I believe that was intentional. And that is why Kirk had to die. If they're gonna bring him back, he has to either go back to the Nexus at the end of the thing, or he has to die. Now, a lot of people, in all fairness, complain not so much that Kirk died, but the manner in which he died. But this doesn't bother me either. Kirk died, actually he died twice in this movie, and in both cases he died trying to save something, either a world or a ship or something. And that's what Kirk did, and Kirk did so each and every time knowing that he was putting his life on the line, that this could be the last mission. He died doing what he wanted to do. He died saving the world, he died making a difference, and that ultimately is the point of having his character there. Is it a kind of mundane death? Yeah, but what death isn't mundane? So at any rate, I recognize that this movie has a lot of flaws, and I can see why a lot of people regard it as a bad movie, but I still really like it. It's still one of my favorite movies. I'd call it a guilty pleasure, except I really don't feel any guilt for liking this movie. I think there are a lot of really good things about it, and the things that aren't so good, I'm willing to forgive. So I still really love this movie. If you disagree with me, you're just gonna have to deal with it. And that's it for me. Until next time, live long and prosper. Had to do it. Had to do it. Mysterious space phenomena that's... Phenomena? Do. Point due.
Weird.
I know.
And you have vlogging pants.
I'm not wearing my vlogging pants.
I know, but you're not. That little part needs to go in at the end. I'm not wearing my vlogging pants.
I'm not wearing my vlogging pants.
And you're like, what the hell?
Just for you. I will put that in.